And today we're going to make a pizza that's very good for you because we're going to use whole wheat flour. That's right. And it's going to be called pizza integrale. Integrale means whole wheat. And so you want to start with some whole wheat flour, and I want to show you the difference. This is whole wheat flour. Remember the word beg, bran, endosperm, and germ. That's what's in whole wheat flour. As opposed to this, you see the difference in color between this? It's more brown looking. And here we have unbleached all-purpose flour, which only has the B, the endosperm. It doesn't have the bran or the germ. So this is really nutritious. It's the whole wheat kernel. And because we're using whole wheat today, it works a little differently than unbleached all-purpose flour. It's going to take a little bit more time to rise. So how do you get around that? You get around it by creating a mother dough, a biga, as it's called in Italian, or if in English it's called a sponge. And it's a dough that's going to give the second dough a little bit of forza. So here's how you make it. You want to start in a bowl with about 1/2 cup of warm water. And to that, we're going to add a teaspoon of dried yeast. So you sprinkle in a teaspoon of dried yeast and 1/2 cup of the whole white wheat flour. This is whole white wheat flour. It's a different strain of whole wheat. And all you do is mix that around. And this is your sponge. You allow this to ferment for about 35 to 40 minutes. It'll start to get bubbly and smell yeasty. It'll increase in volume a little bit. So once you have it all mixed, you want to cover it and put it off somewhere in a warm place to rise. So just cover it with a little piece of plastic wrap. You put it somewhere warm to rise. And when it's risen, it'll look something like this, you see? Here we have one that's very yeasty smelling. See how fluffy it is? And now that's ready to put together with our second dough. So we have to make another dough. So that's all ready. So we're going to start in our mixer with a cup of warm water. Between 110, 115 degrees is perfect. And if you make a lot of dough, you just know the right temperature of the water. But if you don't, then you want to get an instant read thermometer and put it in the water, check to see that you have the right temperature. Again, we're going to put a teaspoon of dried yeast in the water, and we're just going to mix that up. And we're going to add the sponge. So the sponge goes in. Put all of the sponge in. Remember, this is our forza dough, the one that's going to give us that extra oomph that's going to help the gluten in the dough. And then we have our unbleached flour, or whole wheat flour rather. We're not using unbleached today. Here's our whole wheat flour. And this is something called wheat gluten. This is something that also helps dough rise. And you can buy this in a grocery store, just called wheat gluten. So you want to mix that around. And we also need salt, because salt will control the fermentation of the dough. If you don't put salt in the dough is just going to run rampant. So this will control the development of the yeast, and also provides the flavor and gives color to whatever you are making. So you put the salt in. And then we want some olive oil. So for this, I like to use about, 2 tablespoons. So 2 tablespoons of olive oil go in. That's about 2 tablespoons. And to help the yeast, I'm also going to add some honey. About 2 tablespoons of honey goes in. See how easy this is? And now we just want to mix that around. Get that well blended. And now we want to add our flour. This is about 2 cups of flour. I'm going to add most of it because I just don't know how much the liquid will take. You want to work the gluten a little bit. That's what kneading does. You want to work the gluten in the dough. So you let it knead you let it go for a few minutes, and you're going to want to put it into an oiled bowl. So I'll put a little bit of oil in my bowl. Stop this, and you see how much better that is. It comes right off the blade. And I like to use the paddle for this, not the dough hook. I think the paddle does a much better job. And now we can take this out, and you see, it's a little tacky, but it's not really sticking to my hands. So in the bowl it goes, and we're going to make this even more nutritious than it already is by adding some toasted sesame seeds. I'm going to put some toasted sesames right in there and just knead that in with my hands. And a trick for those of you who don't make a lot of dough or are afraid to make dough is to put a little oil on your hands. Put a little olive oil on your hands, and that will help you not have dough all over your fingers. So you want to get that kneaded a few minutes, and then you've got to let this rise. So you cover the bowl, again with a piece of plastic wrap, and you want to put this in a warm place. Somewhere where it's around 75 to 80 degrees is fine. But don't go turn on the oven and then put the dough in, turn the oven off and expect it to rise, because it will rise too fast and then you won't get the flavor that you really want. All right, now that we know that, I've made a risen dough for you. And here it is. You see how nice and fluffy that looks. And now we can take this out, because actually this is going to make 2 pizzas. We can get 2 pizzas out of this. So now you see how nice and fluffy that is.